Welcome back to Newsline here on KTN News. Many thanks for staying with us. We want to take a look at that discussion. The BBI rush is what we're calling it. Today, 3 more county assemblies. The County Assembly of Busia, that of West Pokot and that of Trans Nzoia became the latest to approve the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, the BBI Bill, bringing the total number of county assemblies that have approved it and passed it to 6. Only one county assembly, the County Assembly of Baringo, has voted no has rejected that BBI bill. The BBI map shaping up quite vividly there. We are keeping an eye on that for you. And we want to ask, it seems like county assemblies are lining up to pass the BBI bill, but is the process being followed? Is there public participation? Are some of those counties passing this bill too fast? And in the case of Baringo County, the Assembly, did they reject the bill too quickly? We want to take a look at some of those issues that I imagine, even as we wait to see which county assemblies will be debating that bill this week and the next week, and as they wait to vote on the bill, and the proponents of the BBI wait to see if indeed the county assemblies will pass it for it to go to Parliament. And I'm joined in studio by nominated Member of Parliament Jennifer Shamalla. Also joining me is a senator of the county of Homa Bay, Moses Kajwang, whose county assembly has passed the BBI bill. And of course, also joining us tonight on Newsline is Jerotich Sei, development and humanitarian consultant, and also a member of the Linda Katiba group, which is vehemently opposed to the BBI, to the constitutional referendum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. Let's get right into it. Let me begin with you, Mr. Senator. Your county, the County Assembly of Homa Bay, has passed, was one of the first 3 to pass the BBI bill, and some detractors of this process are saying that those counties that have already passed the bill are not following due process, that it's too quick, there is no public participation. Talk to us about that.
Thank you, Ben, and good evening to the viewers and my co-panelists. I want to congratulate the County Assembly of Homa Bay for passing the draft bill that was presented to them. But I also want to congratulate all the other assemblies that have taken a decision on the proposed bill, including Baringo. Even though they didn't do it elegantly, we saw some violence, we saw tear gas canisters lobbed into the chamber. That was unfortunate. That was an affront on devolution and an affront on democracy. Homa Bay County Assembly, when considering the bill, they carried out public participation. It was just done simultaneously. So what they did is that they published a notice, circulated it in the dailies, and made it available widely. They provided email addresses. They provided virtual login access details for those who wanted to attend some of the public participation sessions virtually. And then they also organized meetings across the county. Right. The meetings were taking place on the same day. So I think from my conversation with the County Assembly, they carried out public participation, even though it was not long drawn. Remember, Ben, that whatever we are dealing with, there is a series of stages. It does not become law because the County Assembly has passed it. It will still have to go through Parliament, and because there are certain amendments that touch on reserved areas in accordance with Article 255 of the Constitution, it will still be subjected to a referendum. So you have a situation where for the very first time since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, you have a constitutional amendment that goes beyond county assemblies and Parliament, and there's an expectation that the people will render their verdicts on it. Right. This has caused many county assemblies and many people to think that you can do some minimum public participation at this point, because ultimately, whatever changes that touch on the Constitution will have to be affirmed by the people through a referendum.
All right. Honorable Shamalla, let me come to you. I'm sure you're happy with the progress you're seeing so far with the county assemblies that have passed the bill, but aren't you concerned that they are doing it a bit too fast?
I must say I was bemused when I saw the, whatever you call those promos coming out, and you said rushing the BBI. I think it's important that we put things in context and in the timelines. The issue of the BBI did not start 2 or 3 months ago. The issue of the BBI started during the nullification of the 2017 election. And I must repeat it time and time again. This country, we lost $58.9 billion in that election cycle. And the Right Honourable Raila Odinga did state on one of the local vernacular stations this week that we had a country whereby the President, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, was seeing, as the President, was seeing his country being ripped apart and saw a Somalia-type situation. And Raila, the Right Honourable Raila Odinga, saw himself being charged because he had gone and sworn him, or had himself sworn in at Uhuru Park, which is a treasonable offence, and could have faced charges of treason, of which the penalty is hanging by death. This is the kind of situation, and this is when the BBI, the backdrop to the BBI process began. Fast forward 2018, at the footsteps of the Office of the President at Harambee House, we saw these two leaders shake hands, come together, and that's when the BBI process started. We then saw a task force put together of the late, and may his soul rest in eternal peace, Yusuf Haji chairing the BBI task force. They went around the country. They interviewed at least 7,000 people.
Yes.
They then gathered thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of memoranda. This was subjected to a validation process to ensure that the correct views had been incorporated and accurate comments of what the people of Kenya had said. And this was then finally launched at Bomas of Kenya. To say that we're rushing the BBI, I think, is really not the correct position.
But still, we have 3 months, Mheshimiwa. This process has 3 months set aside for it. There are those who say that the rush is so that we can have a referendum by June.
Which part is the rush? I don't understand. Because the process is that they launched the BBI, they then go out and take it to the... Where is the rush in this entire process, which started in actually the catalyst for it was the nullification of the 2017 election. I'm not quite sure where it's suddenly as if some people have woken up and said, oh gosh, BBI is upon us. They thought it was never going to happen. There's a whole process that's been going on for 2.5 years. Where is the rush? It has been subjected to all these procedures. It will now, as the Honourable Senator Kajwang said, go to all the 47 counties. The process thereafter, it will come to the National Assembly. And this is not a normal bill. This is not a bill whereby it comes to the National Assembly, to Parliament, and we will have powers to even amend it. The final arbiter, the final decision maker on this bill is the referendum. So do we want it to be stretched out like we had the stretching out of a presidential election, or do we want it settled? And it will go to the people, and the people will decide. If they say yes, it's their democratic will. If the majority say no, we get on with life. What is this rushing out? Do we want to be in a constant electioneering period? We've got to settle things before 2022.
Fair enough. Let's bring in Jerotich into this conversation. Chero, good evening. You are part of the Linda Katiba group, which is opposed to the BBI process to change the constitution. But from what we're seeing, what we're calling the BBI map, it's 6 to 1 now in terms of those county assemblies that have passed the bill versus the one that has, rejected it. Look away now, you and your Linda Katiba group, but what is your take on how this is unfolding?
Good evening, Ben, and thank you very much, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And I also want to extend my condolences to the families who have recently lost loved ones, and may their souls rest in peace. You know, for me, in terms of the speediness with which the county assemblies are passing or rejecting the referendum, the constitutional amendment bill, is interesting. And what I have been thinking about is the issue of civic education versus public participation. Did we need to have civic education? And I understand Honorable Shamalla is saying that, we've had 2.5 years. But my question is around the civic education that would be needed in order for the county assemblies to say they have effectively engaged public participation. But connected to that as well is the fact that even if you had public participation, there is no opportunity at this point in time to make any further changes to the document. And I would be disingenuous not to say that any county at this point in time that is voting either yes or no are driven by a political agenda. I think it has less to do with the people. And one of the things that I have always spoken up and about and against is, if this is not about Wanjiko, who is it about? And as the Linda Katiba team, because you have referenced it, Ben, it's good that conservatory orders were issued. And one of the things that I appreciate is that the conservatory orders say that the county assemblies can indeed continue to proceed with whatever it is that they're doing, but the process will be scrutinized. So I do hope that counties are crossing their T's and dotting their I's, because in terms of form, in terms of procedure, there will also be a very good long hard look at what happened. When I saw that Busia had passed had said yes, at least I saw 7 constituencies reference that they had gone around and at least ticked some boxes here and there. But ultimately, as this process speeds along, and I know Honorable Shamalla will disagree with me, as it speeds along, we are heading to the inevitable space, which is the referendum. And I do not know that we're going to be able to do all of these things in time for the 2022 elections. But what I do understand is, so long as the issue of electoral injustice hasn't been addressed, you can tell us to go and vote yes or no all we like. But I want to see where, for example, the Kriegler Commission recommendations were implemented to ensure that at the very least the referendum is free and fair, and we do not have electoral injustice. And this is always what has sparked problems and violence in this country. So it's always, for me, back to the people. Are they effectively engaged? Are they aware? I just saw a short while ago IBC released the latest version of the bill, and I see it on social media. And we always argue that life doesn't happen on Twitter or on social media. Most people will not have access to this document, and it is a complicated document. So I want to see what simplification process took place in order to ensure that it is as popularized as possible, so that when people say yes or no, it's not based on what their political kingpin has said or where they think they ought to stand in the equation or in the algebra of Kenya and as communities or as groups and regions and so on, but rather what it really means for them in terms of an amelioration of their lives. And finally, Ben, I think for me, this process is not simply an amendment process. This is an entire repeal process. When I look at all the matters that need to be addressed, when I look at the fundamental elements of the Constitution that are being touched in this amendment bill, it does not require the 2.5 years. It requires, look at the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. It took 20 years for us to get there.
You think
it's
a
yes,
it's a repeal
I do
job?
think it is rushed. It is rushed.
Okay.
It's a repeal job, and this is exactly why we went to seek an advisory.
Okay,
David Lee, myself, and a few others, and to just sorry, Ben, just to complete the sentence, to just say, let us look at the basic structure of the Constitution and what is tantamount to a repeal versus an amendment. So, indeed, if this is a repeal process, it is extremely rushed.
All right. Honorable Shamalla, I want you to...
With my utmost respect to Jerotich, and I'm not addressing her on this directly, the word civic education rings of organizations looking for donor funding. It's insulting to use the word civic education when 4.4 million people signed up when the notices went out in support of BBI. Of course, when the signatures were verified, it's 1.1. It's insulting to assume that Kenyans don't know what they want for themselves. It was not the late Yusuf Haji committee that went out and told the people, this is what we want, and the records are there. It was the people who came and said, these are our issues, and this is what we want, and these are our problems. So to say that Wanjiku needs civic education, there is no people, I think, on the entire continent of the world that are as politically savvy as Kenyans and don't understand their constitution. It is suggesting to us that Kenyans don't know what they want and that this document came from nowhere and that there's 4.4 million people and the issue here was this is 10% of the entire population of Kenya. Now, what standard of public participation do you want? And to then suggest that civic education should be carried out because the promoters of this amendment bill, let us be very clear, are the Right Honourable Raila Odinga and His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya. They went out and they then told the people of Kenya what this constitutional amendment bill was. Right. I think it is also using these wide words, what am I looking for, but these sweeping statements about the entire constitution has been overhauled. Tell us which parts of, has the preamble been overhauled? Has Article 10 of values and principles of the constitution been overhauled? Let us speak with facts. And when you make a statement, back it up with your facts and with your figures.
All right. I want to go to Senator.
And let me finish this. On electoral injustices, why are we talking about the electoral injustices? Have we thrown out this report? You're talking about implementing reports. The BBI, by the way, is not just about a constitutional amendment. Right. It's about amendments, it's about policies, new policies, legislative frameworks, and within this entire context, they will need this constitutional amendment bill to go to a referendum.
It's also about where this whole process began, the 9-point agenda, which I want to go to Senator Kajwang, but before that, Jerotich, let me give you 30 seconds to respond to some of those things.
Yes, I think civic education, if you go to Article 10, is part of the public participation process. And with due respect, I'm not insulting the intelligence of Kenyans, but to say that if the 9-point agenda was the first thing that was sent around the country and people provided their views about it. Now we're getting to the stage where we're now talking about the amendment bill. And people do deserve the right to understand better what is contained in it, moving forward from the 9-point agenda, which triggered the BBI process.
And that happened in the counties.
That is what I refer to by civic education.
Okay. And that is the role of
addressing and touching the fundamental. Should I let you go ahead?
Yes.
Do go ahead.
I just want to rebut that, which is what is happening right now, and that is why it has been sent to the counties. And you did hear the Honourable Senator say that in the Homa Bay constituency, immediately they received the notice from IEBC. On the first day, they sent out adverts on vernacular stations.
All right.
They made, and the
Let's
rest
go to the Honourable Senator.
Look, that is not what Ben, let me just complete, because I kept quiet when I was counter-rebutted.
Yes, Jerotich.
I asked the question as to whether there had been enough time for effective civic education around the amendment bill to take place. And that is the question that I maintain, and that's a question mark that I left. So the speed with which some of the county assemblies are moving gives me pause for thought as to the effectiveness of the popularization of the amendment bill. And in terms of a repeal, my second rebuttal, repeal versus an amendment process, when you're touching on the Bill of Rights, and you need to go to Article 255 and have a look there. If we are touching on the Bill of Rights, for example, the right to privacy is touched on in this amendment bill. If you're looking at the independence of the judiciary and commissions and independent offices, functions of the parliament, devolution, and so on and so forth, we are touching fundamental aspects of this constitution, and that is tantamount to the beginning of a repeal process. And it is disingenuous to leave it at an amendment level, especially when our Bill of Rights as citizens of this country is affected. But that's what I'd like to say, and maybe as we proceed, we shall see how, as panelists, we are able to understand where we're coming from, as opposed to spending the show just rebutting one another. Point
taken. Let me go to Senator Kajwang. You've been quiet for a bit. Before we talk about the politics of what's happening right now, just give us a reaction of what the two ladies are saying in terms of, do you think there has been enough civic education vis-a-vis the size of the job that this constitutional referendum of this reforms can be if we have a referendum?
Ben, we must be fair to members of county assemblies. It would be unfortunate for us to describe their actions as being driven by pork barrel and such other considerations. If you look at the manner in which the draft bill has been tailored, it has certain benefits that county governments will find quite irresistible to reject. It has benefits that even county assemblies will find quite irresistible. But these are not benefits to MCAs, and they are not benefits to governors. They are benefits to the citizens who live in those counties. It has always been my argument that the minimum threshold of 15% that is in our current constitution is inadequate to fund the functions that are captured in the 4th schedule of our constitution. And any Kenyan who thinks rightly and thinks straight, any Kenyan who's concerned about the plight of health workers in our counties who cannot be paid a decent salary simply because the resources going to counties is inadequate should be able to appreciate the lifting of the lower limit from 15 to 35%. So I want to believe that those counties that have made the decision to pass the draft bill are driven by bigger considerations and better benefits that are coming to their people rather than what is going to their stomach or to their pockets. And I think it is also not fair to say that the assemblies are acting at the behest of their political godfathers. I do not think that the increased resources to county governments will be going to political godfathers. Secondly, the conversation about repeal cannot be further from the truth. Because even the Bill of Rights, the only part where the proposed amendments touches on the Bill of Rights is on the issue of privacy. And it is not taking away the right to privacy. In fact, it is strengthening the right to privacy in line with global trends, in line with what has been happening in places like Europe, where you have the general data regulations that have been put into force. So what we are doing is just to be in line and in touch with global trends. Even the judiciary. Right now, the Chief Justice is considered to be the ombudsman of the judiciary. So if you're going to talk about clarity in setting up the office of ombudsman and a different process of recruitment and separation of duties between the president of the Supreme Court and the office of the ombudsman, it is not a repeal of the Constitution. It is a strengthening and giving further effect. And that is why in Article 255, it was said by the drafters of the current Constitution that if you have amendments that will touch on Bill of Rights, even if it's just enhancements on the right to privacy, even if it's just giving further effect to the office of the Ombudsman, even if it's just giving further clarity on the role of Parliament vis-a-vis the executive, it has to go to the people through a referendum. And finally, Ben, I have heard this argument that the Kriegler Commission report has not been implemented. Let me tell you, our politics is dynamic. Our politics has not been static as of 2007. For those of us, or for those who are watching, who are young, who are still in primary school and were not of voting age when Kriegler was called in 2007 to look into the post-election violence and the madness that occurred back then, we must encourage them that from 2007 to date, there have been certain progressive gains that this country has made. However, there are still some bad behaviors. There are still some bad manners, like the capture of the IBC. There are still some bad rules of the game, like the winner takes it all, that then becomes a catalyst for violence at every electoral cycle. The BBI report, not just the constitutional amendment bit of it, has attempted to provide an answer to the issue of divisive elections, to the issue of ethnic antagonism. I would wish to hear from Linda Katiba, because they seem to be the only team that is out there opposing the Constitution. And when it comes now to the proper referendum debate, I hope they will strongly and gallantly come out to lead the no campaign. I would wish to hear what the alternative proposal is, and let them not tell us about the Kriegler report, because the BBI task force, they told us they looked at the Kriegler report, they looked at the TGRC report, they took into account the views of Kenyans who were not of voting age in 2007 and in those years when TGRC report was written, and they have come up with a document that captures the modern views and aspirations of Kenyans. So it's not just a matter of telling us implement Kriegler report first before you implement BBI. What we have is a progressive document, is an improvement from what we had back then in 2007. And finally, really, the issue of civic education is not something that should wait for an event for it to be spurred. It is supposed to be a continuous matter. I have just been looking at the national policy on civic education, and unfortunately, it is still in draft form. In the Senate, Senator Amos Wako brought a proposed bill to guide public participation in this country. Unfortunately, because of the differences between the National Assembly and the Senate, that bill has not seen the light of day. We have a responsibility to ensure that we have a good framework. We have a good policy framework. We have a good statutory framework to guide public education and civic education. But Jerotich, do not be daunted by the sheer volume of the BBI report. I think when you see it and you are seeing 200 pages plus volumes 1, 2, and 3, you might think that we are repealing a constitution which is about 180 pages. The matters that will go into the constitution as amendments to the current constitution are not as many as the policy issues, as the administrative issues, and as the statutory matters. Indeed, Mheshimiwa Shamalla and I, we are going to have our hands full between now and the next election, because we have more than 20 pieces of legislation that we have to pass to give effect to the Constitution. And we have more than 20 policy papers that will have to come to Parliament as sessional papers for us to give effect to some of the amendments in the Constitution. I would like us to look at this glass as half full rather than as half empty, and as Linda Katiba pokes holes in probably the content, they should also be telling us that if it is divisive elections, what is their alternative proposal as compared to what is contained in the BBI? I
want to take you to something you said there and move this conversation right along the political pressure that some pundits are saying is affecting or is putting pressure on the county assemblies. But let me give Jerotich a minute to respond to what the senator said, because there is two of you and one of her. It's only fair. Jerotich.
No, don't worry. I do not feel outnumbered in the least. And it might please Senator Kajwang to know that I have read every word cover to cover, because if I say I have objections, actually I am, perhaps maybe not so many Kenyans have had that luxury and opportunity, but since the first release in 2019 through to date, I can assure you I have read it. So the patronage is not necessary. But ultimately for me, the fact that we have sought this advisory will enable us to establish indeed whether this is a repeal or an amendment process, what is a basic structure, what constitutes an amendment versus a repeal. But ultimately for me, you cannot use the very same instrument that empowers we the people to ultimately undermine the same constitution that protects we the people from said undermining. In other words, to use the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to begin to say we have, as the people, an opportunity to change this and that and this and that and the other, and ultimately end up with a document that erodes the same gains that are protected and enshrined in Constitution of Kenya 2010. That is my issue. But we leave the courts to decide this, Ben, or else we will be forever going back and forth. But I want to touch on something. Often we are told, as those who are part of the No campaign, and Linda Katiba, we're a few people, but there are very, very many Kenyans, whether they subscribe to the Linda Katiba platform or not, who have reservations and objections to this whole BBI process. But I want to underscore that it is those that brought forward the BBI that have the burden of proof to explain to us why they think we need to go this way. And the rebuttals that I often receive saying, what is your alternative? My alternative is implement the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And what we are facing today is impunity and disobedience to the Constitution of Kenya, the rule of law, by those who are in power. And I do not see how BBI in any way, shape or form is going to enhance a respect and a protection of the Constitution. We have added things, we have expanded the executive, we have expanded the parliament, and we are eroding the independence of the judiciary and commissions. But here we are saying that this BBI will take us down a path that will make us a stronger and better country. And as far as the 35% goes, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. But when you read the fine print, and I did read it, Senator Kajwang, and it says that that 35 will also be prioritized in areas where there are population and services. It takes me straight back to sessional paper number 10 and saying that ultimately, even when that 35% is being allocated, it will be allocated according to services that are available in those areas. And it's going to act against those areas that do not yet have the services in place. So there are many things we can debate about, but ultimately it's about implementing the Constitution of Kenya 2010 fully.
So Linda Katiba, Mheshimiwa Shamalla have been saying that we need just to simply implement the 2010 Constitution. I want you to give us your response.
Yes, my response is that I would like Jerotich, when they keep on saying we are a few people, but we are out there and the Constitution is being eroded. She said the privacy rights are being eroded, and I don't want to have any rebuttals because we're not in a court of law defending a case. 4.4 million people have said we understand and have been reached out to. What are their statistics for how many people disagree with them? Because they say they are overthrowing the Constitution. How many people are of this view? Because ultimately, democracy is about the majority. And that's what it's about, and that's the reality. So again, I'm saying these wide, sweeping statements, no facts, no numbers, it's difficult for one to respond to these sorts of statements.
All right, I want us to change course a bit. Mheshimiwa Senator, something you mentioned there and something I wanted us to focus on, the political pressure, or if the members of county assemblies are being coerced in a way, to vote for the BBI bill. We have seen the issue of the car grants that we have been talking about for the last 2 weeks. I want to get your views on that. We also have reported MCAs from Western Kenya saying they need 500,000 shillings to pass the bill. And you can't say that there is no political pressure by the political figureheads. Of course there is, and there is an element of 2022 politics where if you do not deliver the vote in your county assemblies in your region, then there's some sort of political clout that you're losing. Is it really possible to divorce this from the politics of 2022?
Ben, before I address that, there's something Jerotich has said, which if we leave it standing, people might think it's the truth. This is an issue of division and allocation of revenue.
All right.
In as much as the BBI draft bill has proposed certain variables to be considered, it has not changed Article 217 and Article 218 of the Constitution of Kenya. These are the articles that talk about the annual division of revenue and annual allocation of revenue. It has not taken away the role of the Senate in determining the formula for allocation of revenue. The fight we had last year, where some counties rejected a formula that seemed to favor some parts of the country, we had the same argument of sessional paper number 10. Jerotich, we have not struck out Article 217 or Article 218. So even as we speak against the BBI, let us speak about it in truth. And I appreciate the fact that you have read it. We don't need to be too sensitive about it. I expect that many more Kenyans have read it. It is not true. that there is anything there that entrenches the iniquities and inequalities of sessional paper number 10, because the Senate will still undertake that role, and it will also do it in collaboration with the National Assembly.
Fair point,
I do not think also that the fact that, for example, Baringo County Assembly has rejected the BBI draft bill, I don't think that, that you need to read too much into that as far as national politics is concerned. One thing we know is that there will be counties that will reject the draft bill. And I don't think they should be demonized. And I also don't think Jerotich and team should be demonized for opposing the draft bill. It is their constitutional right. The only minimum thing we are saying is that instead of them giving us platonic and high-sounding views, it would have been useful to Kenyans to see that where you are proposing that let us have power decongested from the center.
All right.
Because what BBI is doing, we have been complaining about the imperial presidency forever. Then we went into a presidential system which made the presidency still very imperial. We just moved some functions to the judiciary, to parliament, and to independent commissions. But the executive power of the state is still squarely in the hands of the presidency. And we are saying we want the presidency to share power by having a prime minister and by having parliament also sharing some of that executive power. If that is wrong, I don't think we should hide under issues of the burden of proof is on the proposer. We need to hear from public intellectuals like Jerotich what their alternative version is and how that is going to work. The issues coming out of Western, that people are demanding cash for passage of BBI, I don't think those are issues that are substantiated. And if that was to be the case, that then would be a criminal matter. Because as it is in the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act, which county assemblies subscribe to, it is an offense to seek an inducement to make a decision on any matter before an assembly or before parliament. And if that can be established as a matter of fact, then I would recommend that necessary action be undertaken. But Ben, as I said,
what are your thoughts, Senator, on the car grants for the MCAs? What are your thoughts on that quickly?
Now, let me tell you, since I got into the Senate, which is now about 6 years, I have attended the annual legislative conference. The legislative conference brings together members of county assemblies from all over the country and the Senate. And if your memory serves you right, just about 2 years ago, I was almost lynched by MCAs in Mombasa. Why was I almost lynched? Because I spoke out in opposition to the establishment of a ward fund and also issues to do with mortgages and car grants. Because at that point, I believe that we did not have a proper framework for the county assemblies to receive those kind of benefits. And I advocated for a proper framework guided by the control of budget, guided by SRC to put those matters in place. Today, the SRC has pronounced itself on the matter. There are people who question the timing, there are people who question the prioritization, and I do sympathize with those who question because we have doctors and health workers and other people in counties who we think should have deserved those rises. But you are not going to go far if you decide to sniff out one light so that you can light another. If MCAs deserve it, doctors also deserve it. Let us not say that because doctors are not getting it, MCAs should not get it. Let us find a situation where we give everyone deserving the kind of reward and compensation that they need in the counties.
Honorable Shamalla, there are Kenyans saying MCAs are being bribed to pass the BBI. What do you say to that?
Very straightforward, very simple. Everyone on this show today, every panelist, will not say they don't believe in inclusiveness. If indeed you believe in inclusiveness, and if the members of Parliament, the National Assembly and Senate are given car grants, why is it that their representatives at a devolved unit are not able to access the same grant? They do exactly the same work that the senators and the members of Parliament do at the devolved unit. That's my simple statement on that. And to couch it as a bribe is really, really unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. It is these taglines that have been constantly made to elected representatives of the people. It started first with MPIGs, yet everybody who calls people an MPIG aspires to come to that same honourable house. And now it's an attack on at the devolved unit of the people's representatives. It's really quite unacceptable.
Jerotich, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think the debate will be hot as to whether it's an inducement or not. But my position is that the country can scarce afford this at this point in time. And that is my point of departure. And the speculation around whether this was suspiciously timed to suit the moment that the county assemblies are meant to vote on the amendment bill or not, this is out and being discussed quite vigorously. But I want to go back to what Senator Kajwang was referencing. And I just found it absolutely fantastic that he was making a very strong case for civic education. In fact, what we are discussing and debating is exactly what I'm saying should happen on the ground. And this is different than the 9 points that gave birth to the whole BBI report that then gave birth to this amendment bill. What Senator Kajwang and I were possibly debating, and also Senator Shamalla, is something that should be out in the public domain, vigorously, rigorously discussed, so that at the end of the day, everybody understands all these various provisions, all the aspects that will be amended, and they can decide, is this an amendment? Is it not an amendment? Is it affecting me or not? This is where I come back to the issue of civic education and saying that we must have this kind of debate. And that is why if Baringo said no, based on what? If Homa Bay said yes, Senator Kajwang has said why Homa Bay said yes. But ultimately, we are not giving the people of Kenya enough time to internalize what this amendment bill is all about. But like I said, there are conservatory orders, there's 17 matters before this 5-judge bench, and we shall hear eventually whether we do have a case and whether we are able to find a space where if people want to amend the Constitution or have some fundamental issues hidden under around succession and around taking us back to the pre-1991 days, not to hide it around the wonderful issues of 35% or increase of your right to privacy and so on and so forth, but rather just come out and say this is really all about succession. And before we get to that particular point, we're going to see counties saying yes, we'll see them saying no, and then we will rush helter-skelter into referendum, and then we will contest the result, because no one will know whether their yes was really counted or their no was really counted. And so for the reasons that I see the BBI proponents pushing hard and fast to make sure that everything is wrapped nicely in a neat little bow before 2022, this is what raises my alarm bells and makes me wonder why there's such a hard and harsh push to make sure that we've ticked all boxes before 2022 and ready to move on with this new constitution or repeal or whatever it is that will come out of this process. But I think the case is here being made by Senator Kajwang that we need to continue to have this robust and rigorous debate and educate as many people as possible, which is different than collecting 4.4 million signatures, and it is more about saying what does this mean for you, because there are more than 4.4 million people in Kenya, and you want to be sure that when everybody gets to this referendum, they are well aware of what it is they're voting for or against, so that we do not accuse the process of having been driven by political kingpins.
As we wind this up, ladies and gentlemen, many central Kenya county assemblies will be debating this and voting on it this coming week, in the next few days. I've had plans in Tharaka Nithi, in Nyeri, in Murang'a. Senator Kajwang, how worried is President Uhuru Kenyatta on delivering BBI from the 10 county assemblies in central Kenya?
President Uhuru Kenyatta has gone all out to campaign for the BBI, and I do believe that he would wish to convince, not using violence, not using the state, not using force, but using reason, that will convince not just the Mount Kenya county assemblies, but all county assemblies to pass the draft bill, because it cannot go into a referendum unless it goes through the county assemblies. I am aware that the county assemblies, particularly in the Mount Kenya region, agreed on a 14-day process. They agreed to lengthen their public participation a little bit compared to other counties, so that if there are any traps that have been set by those wishing that this process would collapse at the courts of law, they are able to overcome those hurdles. But Ben, you must agree, and I want to put this hypothesis, that even though people are complaining that we need to first implement the current constitution, look at the Kenya that we have today. We have a Kenya where the judiciary can overturn the results of a presidential election and people go back to the polls. And the president-elect accepts to go back to the polls. We have a Kenya today where matters have been taken to court. Jerotich and other interested parties have gone to court, and the courts have issued conservatory orders. But even where the court has issued conservatory orders, it has still respected the separation of power, because the judiciary cannot stop a process that is already underway in Parliament or in a county assembly. Right. And even Parliament cannot stop a process that is already before the courts of law. We have a Kenya today where the Deputy President and members of Parliament from the ruling coalition can go out openly and criticize and scandalize to the point of even slandering the President, and they are not detained, and they are not, no serious actions being taken against them. What I'm trying to say is that the constitution we have, the 2010 constitution, I agree with those who say that it is progressive and it needs to be implemented. To an extent, this constitution has been implemented. Otherwise, today, we would be saying that we don't give a damn about the judiciary. We are Parliament and we are the people, and the people have the right. Here we are saying we shall process this matter in assemblies, in Parliament, as we wait for the court to give direction. What if, God forbid, the court said that the process is flawed? I do not think there is any Kenyan leader today that will defy the courts and proceed with the referendum. That is a Kenya we need to build. And what BBI is doing is out of experimentation of about 10 years now. We have seen the parts that do not fit very well. We have seen the parts that if we continue encouraging, there will be anarchy. And that is why the BBI does not seek to repeal the current constitution. It seeks to correct those aspects that we have experimented on. What needs to be implemented still remains. I think 90% of the constitution is untouched. Yes. And yes, I agree that any person who is in the executive or in Parliament must see to it that the constitution is fully and faithfully implemented. In fact, these things that Jerotich and David Ndii and Martha Karua are saying should not be a contradiction. No one denies the fact that the constitution should be implemented. No one denies the fact that the constitution should be obeyed. Why would anyone deny the fact that where there are areas that we have realized there are problems in implementation, why can't we amend them? And after amending them, let us implement them. Finally, Ben, yes, there's been some concern that we should be talking about the economy. Let me tell you, the BBI does not have a constitutional amendment on the economy beside compelling the state to engage in sustainable development, which includes the blue economy, pastoralism, fisheries, etc. But on the policy aspects and on the statutory and administrative aspects, there are a lot of good ideas which, if implemented, can result into an economic revolution that will move Kenyan youth from pushers of wheelbarrows to inventors of battery-powered vehicles and to inventors of rockets, just like the South African called Elon Musk is doing in the US now. And that is why I would really love to see a quick conclusion of the constitutional debate and the referendum debate, yes, so that we can now start implementing the provisions of the BBI that touch directly on the economy, on jobs, on employment, and the young people of this country.
Thank you, Bwana Senator. Mheshimiwa Shamalla, your final remarks.
My final remarks are that, especially with regards to Central Kenya, we must remember that His Excellency the President did meet and engaged in public participation with 4,000 delegates at Sagana. My final remarks about BBI are that we must remember it is about never again. We will never see the violence we saw in 2007. We will never see the violence we saw in 2017. It is about inclusiveness. Least, but not least, it is about dealing with the biggest monster in this country, which is corruption. And at this point, I really want to give credit to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. In the last year of 2020, they have managed to recover 20 billion of assets stolen from public coffers, whether it's money, whether it's lands, etc., etc. The BBI recognizes this issue of corruption as an existential threat to the Republic of Kenya. And the corruption affects everything we do in this country. Indeed, in 2014, I think our numbers were, we were 130 down on the ease of doing business of the World Bank Index. Today, as we speak, we are third at the ease of doing business in sub-Saharan Africa. And the first point of contact for anyone who wants to do business in this country, be they locals, be they foreign investors, is government. And we must deal with this issue of corruption. We cannot have situations where government agencies, I'll give you an example, the Agricultural Finance Corporation of Kenya. You have their legal officer who has been charged in a court of law, a lawyer, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, for trying to solicit a bribe of 3.5 billion by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption, and he still sits in that office. And there's a lot of other scandals around that particular office. So the first thing we're going to do, and BBI addresses it decisively. Going forward, I am absolutely certain that we didn't rush the BBI process. It took over 2.5 years, and at the end of the day, it shall be the will of the people. And because we believe in democracy, if it's yes, it's yes. If it's no, it's no. But never again will there be violence in this country because of electoral violence.
Thank you. Jerotich, your final remarks.
Thanks very much, Ben. The Constitution of Kenya is a transformational document, and nowhere in all the arguments that I've heard about BBI and its amendments or repeals or whatever it's doing, nowhere have I heard how it is that ultimately everything that has gone wrong these past 10 years will be magically reinforced or enforced by these BBI amendments. There is no perfect document, and you can argue that every document could do with a bit of ameliorative or corrective action. But what I see here with the BBI, and many of us see with the BBI, is something that is shrouding a deeper intention. And this is why I believe the process is rushed so much, so that Kenyans do not take the time to stop and think and be historical and understand why it is that there is this push around succession politics, and there's this push to expand the executive. There's this push to pretend that this is about ending divisive politics. And I would urge every single Kenyan, wherever they are, to understand that as you go to bed tonight, with or without food, worried about school fees, worried about hospital bills, understand that what we have in Kenya is not a constitutional crisis. We have a crisis of leadership. We have a lack of political will to do the right thing, respect and obey the Constitution of Kenya. And until we address that, no number of amendments, BBI or otherwise, will change it. But the Constitution of Kenya 2010 as it stands is integral, it is strong, and needs to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. That's how we leave it on Newsline tonight. Jerotich Sei, humanitarian development consultant, member of the Linda Katiba Group, and of course, Senator of the County of Homa Bay, Moses Kajwang, and nominated Member of Parliament, Jennifer Shamalla. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for your time tonight, and good night to you. The broadcast tonight. Let's now bring you a quick sneak peek of what to expect in tomorrow's edition of The Standard. Your most qualified newspaper in town, BBI gains speed as 6 counties give it nod. You can read about it in more detail in page 6 of The Standard. Newly minted Unity Alliance shapes up. We also have been reporting on the alliance that is shaping up between KANU, Amani National Congress, Ford Kenya, and the Wiper Party. You can check out that story in much more details in page 8 of the Standard. And of course, there's a story there, an analysis, debt choices that sank Kenyans into deep hole, even as the International Monetary Fund approves that 261 billion facility under a 3-year program. Just where did the rain start beating Kenya? Be sure to grab your copy of the Standard tomorrow. That's why we leave it on Newsline this Tuesday night. Many thanks for watching. For all of us on the broadcast, we appreciate the privilege of your time tonight. Our sign language interpreter tonight was Maresha Owiti. I am Ben Kitili. Good night from Nairobi.